Joining me today on the Day for Freedom, we have Lorianne Dueck. She is the Mobilization and Advocacy Program Coordinator for International Justice Mission Canada. We like to call them IJM. It's a little bit easier on our tongues. Thank you, Lorianne, for joining me today.
Hi, Sylvia. It's so great to be here with you.
Absolutely. We love this whole day, and it really shines a light on human trafficking and how we can help end it. But before we do that, would you mind just kind of defining human trafficking for us?
For sure. So it might be a word that we've all heard a lot of, but what does it mean? What does it look like? So there's a lot of definitions out there. I'm going to read the one that's right off the Government of Canada website so that you can go back to it and know that this is kind of what we're going to talk about today. Obviously, we'll talk a bit more about what's happening internationally, but just to center us on some terminology. So human trafficking involves the recruitment, transportation, harboring, and or exercising control, direction, or influence over the movements of a person in order to exploit that person, typically through sexual exploitation or forced labor. It is often described as a modern form of slavery. And so the definition goes on, but essentially, this is the thing that there's the person who's being trafficked has no control over their movements, their documents, there's violence, there's deceit. This is not a choice. They have not consented to this. And it also involves them, moving. There's usually some kind of movement as well happening. Someone's bringing them to different places. So,
Thank you for that
yeah.
definition. Appreciate it. So, as the Mobilization and Advocacy Programs Coordinator, what does a day look like for you, or what does that job entail?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question as well. And some days I'm still figuring it out, but I do love my job, and we're really engaging with two main groups. So mobilization and advocacy. When we're talking about mobilization, we're talking about mobilizing, catalyzing, encouraging communities. And so that often tends to be faith communities, so churches, but it could also be other networks who are involved in justice. It could be somebody who's just like, I'd really like to host a fundraiser at my house for IJM. How can we do that? So they're mobilizing their network. So I would provide them resources, might help them set up a web page, do some promo with them. So that's when we're talking about mobilization. That can be events. That's getting ready for speaking engagements. That's being on the radio like today. That's speaking at panel discussions. That's this mobilizing the community. And then when we talk about advocacy, that's more related to government advocacy and related to public engagement and awareness. So that would be, social media campaigns. That's letters to members of parliament. That's, we're looking at seeing if there's funding opportunities with the Government of Canada in their budget. And that's also just general, today is also a little bit of advocacy. It's a day for freedom, right? We're doing education and awareness. And at the end of the day, we're going to take action. And we're going to talk to the government. We're going to talk to maybe our local networks and things like that. So hopefully that kind of explains the two pieces of my job and the activities that it covers.
It does. What a clear picture. Thank you. I want to really kind of shine a light here for a second. How big an issue is human trafficking for some people who might not really get the scope of it?
Yeah, it's big. And so like the definition said, human trafficking is considered a form of modern slavery. And modern slavery, that is sex trafficking, that's bonded labor, that's forced labor work. A lot of different things can fall under that. And the stats we have on modern slavery worldwide, and this is likely there's more happening we don't know about, but it's 50 million. So that's more than the population of Canada. And that number, unfortunately, increased in the last 5 years from 40 million to 50 million, partially due to COVID. A lot of people lost their jobs. They're put in vulnerable situations, climate change, other wars going on, like all these things really unsettle people, and that puts them in a situation of vulnerability. And that's where somebody can, take advantage of them, offer them a job. It's not actually a job. It is, but they're not being paid properly and they can't leave. So modern slavery, human trafficking is a big deal, and it is happening all around the world. So often we think, oh, it's not happening in Canada. That's just simply not true. Human trafficking does happen in Canada. We have some pretty big highways. We have a lot of rural communities. And unfortunately, trafficking happens here as well because it makes a lot of money. And I think, let me just go pull my definition up again here on the government page. And it says that the United Nations has estimated that this illegal activity generates approximately 32 billion US dollars annually for perpetrators. I can't even comprehend that amount of money. So it's big in the sense of 50 million people, and it's big in the sense of this is very lucrative. And so it really requires a forced engagement of all of us, Canadians, Christians, people around the world, to say this is not okay. And we're going to try to take action.
Amen to that. I would love if you don't mind shedding some light on some potential myths when it comes to human trafficking.
Sure. And this can be sometimes a sensitive topic as well, right? Because we have our pictures in our head of what we think something is. And then when we find out what it's like, that can be really hard. So, I mean, even for myself, I've worked at IJM for 2.5 years now, and I've had a lot of these myths shattered as well. And, some of those are hard moments, but we know that truth is important. Truth sets us free. Truth is the first step in actually getting to a solution that will address the real problem, right? So yeah, I'll just start listing a few that I learned. One is that the myth that human trafficking is going to, it's kind of like kidnapping or a stranger. It's someone you don't know that's going to perpetrate the crime, someone you don't know. And unfortunately, that's not true. I don't have statistics, but in a lot of situations, unfortunately, it is a relative. In desperate situations, I don't know all the motivations, and so we don't want to cast judgment, but it might be a relative that says to their daughter, okay, I need to I'm going to introduce you to somebody. They're going to give you a job, but it's not actually a job. It's it's a brothel, or it is a different situation. And so there's that. Or it could be, an uncle it lives in another city. You're going to go live with your uncle, and now they're working 12-hour days, and they can't come home. So that's a myth there. Another myth, this is more in the Canadian context, but I know it was something that really stuck with me when I was just starting to learn about justice issues, was the fact that in Canada, most of the people trafficked are Canadian. So they're from Canada, they've lived here, and in Canada, trafficking tends to happen through the Romeo method, which is the boyfriending method that may have been talked about before. You fall in love, somebody, deceives you, says they love you, and you build a relationship with them, and then at some point they actually begin to traffic you. So that's the Canadian side. That was a myth. And so we talked about relatives, we talked about Canada, and I think, this is actually a good myth. I think there's a myth that we can't do anything about this. That the myth is that this is just too horrible. The perpetrators are too smart. The trauma is just too strong. We can't do anything. Like as in we society, or we the justice system, or we the, like, not myself, but like a victim. There's a myth that, like, if this happens to you, your life is over. And at IGM, we just have seen that that's just not true. Like, we've seen justice systems go from cases taking years to get through the system to getting a lot faster, or countries saying, what, this isn't really an issue, to saying, oh my goodness, this is unacceptable for our communities. We're going to invest in our police. We're going to invest in our law enforcement. We're going to invest in training. We're going to be trauma informed. We're going to include these special chambers in our justice system so that if someone wants to give their testimony, they don't have to say it in front of their perpetrator. They can say it in a private room with their social worker, so that we can still get the testimony, but they're not re-traumatized. So, like, again, myth, like, systems can change. Going to the survivor, like, I mean, the human mind and spirit is incredibly resilient. And I mean, God's power is so strong. So to say that someone will never overcome a situation of trafficking is is obviously an act of disbelief, right? And I mean, I've been there. I think we've all had those moments where like, this is too much. That's too much. And I think that's where we really at IJM, we want to lean into prayer and lean into God's word and say, no, like, no, life is always stronger. Truth is always stronger. Freedom is always stronger. But it's going to take work to get there. So anyways, long-winded answer, but I want to end
No,
with
I
that
love
last
it.
myth.
Yes. And that
There's
we
still
can do
hope.
something. It's so important to believe that and then do what
Yeah.
we can do. So that actually brings me to my last question very nicely. How can the, let's say, average Joe help out? Even, for example, you've got some jewelry
Oh,
happening.
yeah.
Just tell
Sure.
me some things that the average person
Yeah.
can do to help.
So there's so much, and I think that's the beauty of of mobilization and advocacy and about how God made each of us is there's something for each of us to do that can help, bring safety and protection and justice. So number one, your classic pray, like pray for everyone involved always. Check your own heart, see where there's anything in you that can be let go of. So number one, two, these earrings I bought in Guatemala when I was visiting there with IJM, and this could sound a little bit offhand, but make sure you know where you're buying your things from, because like when we're talking about modern day slavery, a lot of that is also in factories. It's in, you know, big name brands. So check where you're getting your clothes, because you don't want to be unknowingly, continuing different encouraging forms of slavery. So that's another one. I honestly make sure you know, like, who to call, like in Canada, in the sense of like, if you saw a situation of trafficking or you were concerned that someone in your network was at risk of trafficking, like, do you know who to call? Do you know where to go? Do you know how to have that conversation with that person in a sensitive, trauma-informed way? So like, get training, know the signs. And of course, like as working at IJM, I'd say if you are able to donate, if you are able to say, I want to be a monthly partner to helping ensure that justice systems are strengthened and we're kind of really bringing an end to this, I would say, find an organization like IJM to support as part of your giving. So a couple different options there. And of course, you can always contact me. Our email address is engage@ijm.ca. And so if you have a different idea of how you'd like to help end trafficking and modern slavery, just send us an email and we'd love to chat.
That is amazing. Thank you so much, Lorianne, for all you do, all you are, your heart to help end this worldwide huge issue. And yeah, I really appreciate the time you take. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia, for letting us come today and speak.